Hey guys, Matthew here. In today's guide, we're going to be talking all about the Nemesis 3 farming method. Now, this is nothing new, but it is still currently in the game, probably the best money per hour in terms of killing monsters. Now, this does not include some other strategies, like, say, for example, simulacrums or flipping or crafting or maybe even potentially lab running. But in terms of just outright going in a map and killing monsters, this is probably your best bet. So this is not a super entry-level strategy, but it can be done on some pretty, cheap builds. Which I have included as part of the guide. Now, as always, this entire video has a written form, which is part of my Casual Exalt series, which you can find the link to that document in the description of this video. So if you want to just go check that out, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing really else that I'm going to be talking about in the video other than what's written, other than explaining the reasoning why some of these choices I made. And why this node versus why that node and stuff like that. So if you want to know the why, then stick around. Otherwise, all the information is in the document down below. So let's talk about what is Nemesis 3 for those who don't know. Nemesis 3 is a sextant. That's all it is. It's a sextant that can roll on either awakened or elevated, which means only these two sextants can actually give you the modifier. And what it looks like is this. Nemesis 3... let's see. Nemesis monsters drop 3 or 4, if you're using elevated sextants, additional basic currency items. So what you need to know is basically what is a basic currency item, and that is essentially anything that is not related to a specific league mechanic. For example, a Tainted Exalted Orb cannot drop from this because it is, restricted by the Scourge league mechanic. A Harbinger cannot drop because it's, gated behind the Harbinger league mechanic, I believe, unless they added it to the core pool. But at the very least, a Harbinger shard could not drop because that is 100% gated behind the Harbinger league mechanic. But a normal Exalt could drop a Chaos Orb, an Alchemy, Val Orbs, Scourings, pretty much everything in this tab that is not linked to league mechanics or bosses. Of course, you're not going to drop, say, for example, the Exalted Orbs from the Conquerors. But anything else is fair game. So the idea here is that we want to have as many Nemesis monsters in our map in order to kill them, and then every single time you kill one of them, you are going to drop 3 of these currency items. So, of course, a lot of the time it's going to be Wisdom Scrolls and Portal Scrolls and stuff like that, which have very little value, but it could also be all the other stuff, and it adds up extremely quickly. So the idea is that we want to have as many possible monsters that have the Nemesis basically tag on them. And there's really just 2 ways to go about this. Either you use Nemesis on the map device, which is basically going to give Nemesis to all the rare monsters in your map, or you need to roll it manually on your map if that's not available, and that would look something like this. As you can see here, let's see, where is it? Rare monsters each have a Nemesis modifier. So what that means is that all these monsters are basically going to have the Nemesis modifier, and therefore every single monster that is rare is going to drop 3 basic currency items, or 4 if using elevated sextants. And the idea is therefore to get as many rare monsters as possible on the map, so the best way to do that is going to be Beyond. Now, when you don't have Beyond on the map device, you can still get Beyond through other things, such as, of course, sextants and whatnot. I'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video, but you could also even roll Beyond. So if you had Nemesis on the map device, and you didn't have Beyond on the map device, then you would be doing the opposite. You would roll Nemesis on the map device, and you would roll Beyond on your maps. And that's pretty much the get-go. The idea is that if you're doing Nem 3, you pretty much always want to have Beyond, and you want to have as much juice, as many additional monsters as possible on your maps. So let's talk about how to do exactly that. Now, how do you go about getting the actual sextant itself, right? The Nemesis monsters. So you're going to use this thing called Sextant Blocking. So what that would mean is that I would go in a region that I don't intend on running, so let's say Lear Ithane, and then I would roll sextants that I don't care for with, cheap sextants, because these are always going to be there because I'm never going to run these maps. So for example, this is good. Players and monsters take 8% physical damage, so I'm blocking the 4 additional packs of physical monsters, right? And this has a weighting of 1,000, so you could do the same thing again. I'm blocking fire now. Now, of course, I'll want to have one of these where I'm going to roll my Nemesis 3, so I'm going to have one of them where I'm not going to use any block. And the final block that I want to use is going to be the Gloom Shrine or the Resonating Shrine, and this is going to roll only on Prime Sextants and above. so I don't really have any to show you guys, but I would roll Prime Sextants until I get either Gloom or Resonating in order to block 2,000 because they block each other, and then 1,000 waiting from each of those. Because the Nemesis Sextant has a weighting of 250, which, if you're using all these blocks, 2 of the, say, Fire, Cold, Lightning, whatever, and then the Gloom Shrine, you're blocking 4,000 out of a weighting of, I believe, it's something like 18,000. So you end up with a 1 in 60 roughly awakened sextants in order to roll the Nemesis 3 sextant. That is your average, and if you're juicing your maps enough, you should easily be able to sustain your own sextants. So every 4 maps, you should be able to get enough sextants, because obviously you're going to use Enduring Influence, right? So you'll get 4 maps worth of Nemesis 3 Sextant. You should be getting at least 15 Awakened Sextant per map, so on average, you should easily sustain. On average, of course. So that's basically what the Sextant is and how you go about getting it. Now, otherwise, it's all coming down to juicing. So what about the other Sextants? So again, we're going to care about Alva. Alva is super, super good. You're definitely going to want to have her on every single map that you can. So use your Alva missions. But of course, if you ever run out of Alva missions, it's a great way to get some is to go through the Alva Sextant. You could also use the Alva Prophecy for the time being. Abyss Sextant is also a good one if you are running the Glennach Cairns strategy and not the Valdo's Rest. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Unique bosses are accompanied by a Mysterious Harbinger. That's one that is for the Valdo's Rest strategy. So again, not going to be using that in Glennach. Slaying monsters, slaying enemies close together in areas of 6% chance to attract beyond. So this is one that you can use either in Glennach or in Valdo's Rest because you're going to be using beyond on the map device either way. So in either case, you're going to basically get double beyond, and then you can even go triple beyond if you roll beyond on your map and stuff like that. Or if you use Watchstone, talk about that in a bit. Contains an additional Legion encounter. This is always good. Now, we are not actually going to be getting the Legion node in the Glennach Cairns region. I think that they're pretty bad without Emblematic. So you can actually use a Legion in each of the strategies because it's just overall pretty good to have an additional Legion. An additional Blight encounter. So this is pretty good in Valdo's because we are going to be focusing on Blight with the nodes here. So it's going to save you the Scarab if you run it on your actual Sextants. So it's not lost. Basically, whatever the cost of the Scarab is, say it's 10C, you're basically saving yourself that per map. So 4 maps, it's 40C is the value of that Sextant. So, don't roll over it if you're in Valdo's anyways. Area contains a Mirror of Delirium. Now, Mirror of Delirium is actually not that great. Because the problem with Mirror of Delirium is that it can go away faster if you're a little bit on the slow side of your clear speed, and the map layout is extremely important. But where you really want to use Mirror of Delirium is in Tropical Island, which is currently a T14 map in the Glennach Cairns region. So whenever you roll this Mirror of Delirium Sextant, you want to come in Tropical Island because it's a very, very long layout, and you can get around, a third of a simulacrum, so 100 plus simulacrum splinters if you are juicing your map properly. The downside is that Abyss monsters do not actually stop the Delirium from moving, which is why we are actually going to rather, instead of using the Delirium map mod, which we don't have access to this league, or Delirium Sextant, we're actually going to use Delirium Orbs instead, but still, for Tropical Island especially, it's a pretty good idea to use that. Alright, for the Uncharted Realm, as I already mentioned, Enduring Influence is basically going to be your go-to. You're always going to want to use this because it's going to make it so you roll 4 rolls on your Sextant. Instead of 3 maps worth, you'll get 4 maps worth. That's pretty good. If you're using Watchstones, which are always basically active, such as the ones I'll mention later, but like Fraught or like Exotic for more Blighted maps or more Beyond, then you are going to want to use this, but otherwise, it's not that big of a deal if you want to use this or not. I would always recommend using Close Allies for the additional Master Missions. It's going to help you sustain the Alva because they remove the 3% here, so you have 10% chance. So when you complete a map to get a Master Mission, so it adds up, and you're going to have a much easier time sustaining your Alvas. Not that you'll be able to sustain them. I guarantee you that you won't if you're not, using prophecies or stuff like that. However, all right, Neural Pathways. Now, Neural Pathways is pretty good because it gives you 1% chance to drop a synth map. So this is just going to add up because it also pairs up with your awakening level as well, right? So it's pretty good, and you drop a Cortex here and there, you'll make a nice little chunk of change, and there's nothing else that's too amazing. Otherwise, the rest is really just up to you. If you're adept of farming, Cyrus, you'll go Adept Tracker, you'll go Atlas Awaken, maybe Thaumaturgical Awakening. Otherwise, if you want to focus more on, some bossing related stuff at the same time, because let's say your other character is a bosser, then you might want to come pick up all the bossing related nodes here if you're doing the Shaper and the Guardians and all that good stuff. That's pretty much what you will want to get, but the only thing you really need is the Enduring Influence if you're rolling the Sextants yourself. If you're going to go out and buy the Watchstones with the Sextant pre-rolled, you actually don't care about that. And then Neural Pathways and Close Allies are always very, very good, and Secrets of the Stones is also not bad. Alright, Delirium. As I've already mentioned, we're not getting Delirium on the Mad Device. We are actually not really going to care for Delirium Mirror either, so the way we're going to get Delirium every single map is by using a single Delirium Orb. Now, the Delirium Orb could be any one of your choice, and it doesn't matter. Now, the thing is, a lot of people seem to think that more Delirium percent has more monsters, but that's not true. In terms of pure monster count, 20% Delirium or 100% is the same, so just run as much Delirium as you can actually manage on your build, because of course, running higher tier Delirium maps is typically going to be better. Another thing I would mention is, especially if you are in Valdo's Rest, you can run 40% Delirium if you're capable of with your character to guarantee that you're going to get 2 boss spawns, which is going to amount to roughly 40 Simulacrum Splinters every single map, which is, pretty good. It adds up pretty quickly, but of course, depends on the price of Simulacrums. All right, next, which regions, which maps, and how to juice. So there's quite a few things to talk about here. There's 2 different regions that I think are very good for this right now, and that is going to be Valdo's Rest and Glennach Cairns. And which one is better? I don't think there's any that's better. I think they're both equally as good. It really comes down to your build and, your preferred layout, as well as your preferred league mechanics. So I would say that Glennach is mostly going to be used for trying to, get as many percent Beyond as possible. So on the very, very, very high end, I think that Beyond might edge out a tiny little bit if you have, fraught Watchstones, but that will also mean that you can't go out and buy Sextants. You'll have to roll them yourself. Go and buy Watchstones with the Sextant pre-applied. Now what we're going to go for is Scent of Blood for 3% Beyond, which is really good. And then Thornveil for powerful Beyond demons require 1 fewer portal. So this means that you're going to get, more rares and more bosses, and they're going to merge easier, which means essentially it's all going to, the idea is that to get as much map density or monster density on your maps as possible in order to have these portals, as many of them spawn as possible, because it multiplies basically the value of your Nemesis 3. Every single time an additional rare spawns from Beyond, that's an additional 3 basic currencies. So the more monster density, the better the map layout and all that, the better value you're going to get out of your Sextant. Now, we are always going to go with Time Dilation. That's another one that's really, really good. Now, it's been nerfed. It's only 33% chance instead of 100% chance, but it's still really, really good. And since you're going to want to use Alva anyways, because it's the best master to use in terms of map density and quantity on your map, and just overall, amount of monsters, we are still going to go with that. Next, it's really going to be your choice if you want to go Legion or Abyss, but I would say that Abyss is actually better because of Abyssal Army. Now, Abyssal Army gives you Abyss in area spawn 100% increased monsters. So that is huge. That means that your Abyss, your actual Abyss are going to have an insane amount of monsters. Abyss are already pretty much the number one league mechanic in order of adding monsters to your map. It's ridiculous how many rares actually come out of there. And then pair that up with the Beyond and all that spawning, and it all multiplies together to make some pretty juicy maps. You could also go Legion, but without Emblematic, I feel like it's a bit of a waste. Now, face-to-face is not particularly awful, and neither is high-value targets, but I think that if your goal is strictly Nemesis 3 and trying to drop as many of those Exalts and even potentially Mirrors as possible, you are going to want to go Abyssal Army, and especially Time Dilation as well. So that's pretty much what we're doing here. In terms of the Watchstone, Fraught, or the other one, which is going to be, Demonic, are going to be the way to go. Now, Fraught is extremely rare, and so is the higher tier of Demonic, so they're pretty expensive. So, only do that if you're really going super high-end, which is, like I said, I think that Glennach is probably better for the extremely high-end, but for people who are not going to be investing a ton, I think Valdo's might actually edge out. I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, in terms of Watchstones, Fraught is going to be your best in slot, and then Beyond Portals have chance to spawn additional Beyond Demon is also very, very good. T2 or T1. Obviously, T1 is going to be the go-to. Now, which one is better between Demonic and Fraught? I'm not exactly sure. This is just a flat 1%, which is multiplicative with everything else. Meanwhile, this is kind of like all those portals are going to spawn additional Beyond Demons. So I'm not exactly sure which one's better, but they're both very, very good. So that's pretty much the strategy for Glennach Cairns. Now, let's talk about Valdo's Rest, which I think is probably the better one for people who are not willing to invest as much. Because there's actually a lot of value for very minimal investment in Valdo's Rest. Another thing I need to mention is in the actual guide itself, I have noted down some layouts that I think, or some maps that I think are better in order to farm. Now, this is in consideration of either potential good div cards, good layouts, good mob density, all that. But these are pretty much the maps that you want to care about the most, at least in my opinion. From what I've seen. All right, next, let's talk about, again, Valdo's Rest. So Valdo's Rest, we are actually going to be looking at especially immune response. Because just as we were getting at the downside with Abyss has 100% increased monsters, this one gives us Blight Encounters and areas spawn 100% more non-unique monsters. So it's kind of like the equivalent of the Abyss, except this one is for Blight. And the additional value of getting with Blight is the epidemiology node, which gives you Blight chests and areas have 100% more chance to contain blighted maps. So essentially, this is double the blighted maps that you're going to be getting from this, which is going to be huge. Now, you can also pair that up with the Watchstone modifiers right here, which is called Exotic, which you can get on T1, gives you up to a 20% chance to contain blighted maps or oils. And of course, you can further increase that with Secrets of the Stones, which means you're getting 100% increase plus 100% more. So you are getting a ton of blighted maps when doing so. I will say, if you are going to be running the epidemiology strat in Valdo's Rest, you'll probably want to try to do an indoors layout. It's pretty decent, especially if oils are expensive. Now, the reason for that is because every time you do a blight, you are guaranteed to have at least one chest or one lane, which is going to be giving you oils and also maps, or blighted oils and blighted maps. So by doing an indoor layout, which is cutting the possible maximum amount of actual lanes from the blight because they can't spread, you're going to get one or 2 or 3, but massive amounts of chests, which are basically going to increase the odds of getting blighted maps and blighted oils, which is something you should consider when blighted maps are expensive. Otherwise, you want to go for the maps which just are going to give you more monsters or good div cards, stuff like that. Spores on the Wind is just not great, but it's 5% chance to get basically a free Blight Scarab. So every 20 map drops, one of them, you're not going to need to use a Blighted Scarab, which is pretty cool. Because, of course, we're still going to be using Beyond on the map device. Now, next we're going to go Ominous Arrival alongside Diplomatic Escort, because whenever you do get the powerful Harbinger boss, he adds a ton of actual monsters to your map, sort of similar to the Immune Response node over here. And that is basically going to be pairing up with Harbinger Scarabs is going to be the way to go here. Harbinger Scarab and Blight Scarab. And down here, like I was saying earlier, it's all about the Abyss Scarab, and then the rest of the Scarabs is up to you. Everything, all of that in terms of Scarabs, which ones are the best, and everything else is basically going to be in the guide, so you can check that out. So that's pretty much the way to go, in my opinion. Valdo's probably a little bit better early on, and Glennach probably a little bit better once you can get those Fraught Watchstones or those Demonic Watchstones, which can really, really push the strategy up to the next level. Because this is giving you 3% Beyond, 3 Fraught Watchstones would be an additional 3, which would give you 6% Beyond, and then this gives you, I believe, 5% Beyond, or 15% Beyond, which goes up to 21% Beyond, and then if you go a step further, you can get the Sextant for Beyond, right? Which I believe is also 6% or even 8% for elevated. So you can get a ridiculous amount of Beyond monsters. And the cool thing about slaying monsters for Beyond is that it says slaying enemies close together in areas have a % chance to spawn Beyond. So it's not about rares or magics or uniques. It's just any monsters that you kill on the map, if they're together, which they, you should have a bunch of pack size on your maps and a bunch of juice with everything that I've already mentioned, you can get to the point where you're spawning a gazillion of the actual unique bosses. the unique beyond bosses. And if you actually do that, there is one more Sextant modifier that you can consider, and it is corrupted items. Because this one here, unique monsters drop corrupted items. This is one thing that you can also consider if you want to try to get good unique items that are corrupted, or also farming 6 links. And the reason for that is because those beyond demons, right, the beyond bosses, are unique monsters. So they will drop a bunch of corrupted items, which could mean a lot of 6 links, but also could mean, like, say, for example, jewels with good corruptions, like corrupted blood or mana reserve, stuff like that. And those can be very, very valuable. The downside is that you could, say, drop a headhunter that is corrupted and rare, and that would be, you know, pretty devastating. Now, the odds of that happening is fairly low, but it can happen, which is definitely something that you may want to consider before going down that route. However, with the Krangling and you know, the ability to 6-link chess pieces, especially unique chess pieces, very, very easily, it's definitely something you can consider, because it's going to give you a bunch of chess pieces like uniques, you know, like Shavs or Carcass Jack with like +2 AoE or +2 Trap at Mine, stuff like that, which can be very, very valuable and easily 6-linked due to the tainted fusings. So that's pretty much all I have in terms of my Nemesis 3 full farming guide. Before I go, as always, I do want to say a massive, massive thank you to my supporters. So the list is getting quite long. I really, really want to say huge thanks for the support to Kat, Tim, Thomas, The Great Master, Nate, Alex, Wolverine, Welcome Back, Stan, Brandon, Scott, Axel, Reese, Rescoral, Mercury, Max, Johnny, Hamad, and Georgie. And then also to Nailed, Alex, Kevin, another Alex. Matter of fact, we have 5 people with the name Alex in my current supporters on Patreon, which is absolutely insane. And then, of course, Bitizen. So, huge thanks to you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.